Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Regional Governments and the 2030 Agenda, a dialogue on the territorial implementation of the SDGs. My name is Rodrigo Messias. I'm Policy Officer at the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development, Energy for SD, and I'll be moderating this session today. I can see that some colleagues are still connecting, but just to remind you, this webinar is specially designed to enable an open exchange on the actions and challenges that regional governments are facing in implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. Of course, this webinar builds on Energy First the ongoing work on this field that tracks back to many years, and you can find more information on our website. Before calling our first speaker, I'd like to go through the agenda with you. As you can see on the screen, and also in the GoToWebinar on the handout session, you can find the full agenda to download and check it yourself. But first, we're going to have a welcome and opening remarks with Energy for the Secretary General, and I also will share some elements of the work we have been doing in this topic. Then we will follow on the tools and opportunities that we have, especially on the localization of the SDGs, with a presentation from UNDP Art. Then we will move to a concrete case of a regional government working with the SDGs, which will be the government of Basque Country, represented by Estíbaliz Urselay. Then we are going to invite some regional governments to respond to the presentations and also to share a little bit what they are doing as well on the 2030 Agenda and how they're addressing the SDGs in their governments. We are going to have Sao Paulo, Catalonia as well. And I also know that there are other regional governments also connecting today. And in case that you're a regional government and you would also like to comment during this part of respondents, we kindly ask you to please send us a message on the chat box, identify yourself and your government, and we'll definitely call you once the time has come. Finally, we are gonna have some time for questions and answers that you can, during the presentations, you can already type down your questions in the chat box. And when we get to the Q&A session, we can call your name and read out the question. So before, well, without any other ado, I'd like to invite our Secretary General, Ms. Natalia Vera, who, well, is the foundation that enables us to develop this work in many other fields together with our whole team. And she would like to share some words to welcome you all to this webinar. Please, Natalia. Okay, sorry, there you go. I just see that Natalia was muted. Hello, Natalia, can you hear me now?
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Yes, now I can speak. So thank you very much for this introduction. And I must say I'm especially pleased to open together with Rodrigo today this webinar on regional governments and the 2030 Agenda, because our work on this topic confirms the origins and foundation grounds of the Energy First as an organization. Indeed, as most of you know, the Energy First was created by a group of regional politicians who, in the Rio +10 World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, identified the lack of space and representation to express their views and voices, and demanded international recognition for that. All in a context where the challenges related to sustainability were losing their place in the agendas of developed countries. So it can be stated that the concerns of those regional governments at that time were not only brave when defending the key role of subnational governments in sustainable development matters, but also visionary in their firm belief that by working together, it would be possible to ensure that this theme, the sustainable development, remained a priority at the global level. I must admit that it is very rewarding, and I'm moved to see that after 15 years, some of these regional governments are still today with us and are participating in this webinar, such as the Basque Country, Catalonia, or Sao Paulo. And this way, they confirm their unshakable will to continue working together with Energy First D on raising the stature of regional governments in the global agendas, and in particular, of course, in the Sustainable Development one. Really, it must be said that thanks to this hard work of regional governments within the Energy First D, today we are internationally recognized as necessary actors in the achievement of sustainable development. Likewise, Energy First D as an organization is an organizer partner of the local authorities major group before UNDESA, as well as a member to the Global Task Force. These strategic positions enabled us to work actively and to contribute to the definition process of the current SDGs, and now to make contributions to the annual reviews developed by the high-level political forums. This year in particular, with the report contributions of regional governments to the achievement of the SDGs. This is an exercise that undoubtedly confirms our DNA as Energy First D, which consists of a strong basis of the Sustainable Development Agenda, but also of a firm belief that cooperation of regional governments is very useful and makes us more powerful when we act united. So, in brief, our vision is to build together more integrated, sustainable development and balanced territories, and we are determined to continue doing this together with you brave and committed members. And we will defend your position as real architects of decentralized environmental management and sustainable development. And therefore, we will continue at least for another 15 more years with this task. I would not like to take more time in this brief introduction, but just to say that I'm very proud of these type of initiatives we are building together with you. So I will just give the floor again to Rodrigo so he can proceed with the programmed agenda for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for these inspiring words. It's definitely a pleasure to be part of this team that Energy First D developing this exciting work. Before anything else, I would like to clarify, perhaps some of the attendees might not be familiar with the language that we use, but when we talk about regional government, we are talking about this specific level of government that is intermediary in between the state, the central level of government, and the local level. So it, of course, it's called of very different names depending on the country, but it can be regions, states, provinces, landers, intendancies, counties. So just to clarify on that. So at this stage, okay, so having explained the differentiation of the regional governments and the other levels of government, I'd like to ask representatives and attendees here today, which sector do you come from? I know that some might feel they are not contemplated by any of those options, but that was the limit of options we could have, and we apologize in that case. But I think we managed to fit most of the categories that we have. Okay. So when we are talking about the role that regional governments have in this agenda, of course, we have to think about its specific competences as level of government, as governmental stakeholders, but also, of course, many other elements that regional governments can facilitate. For example, this coordination with the local governments and also with the national governments. And that's why we believe it's very important that we ensure a space for these governments to present and share their actions at the global level. Okay, I think we have most of the people voting. I'll allow some more minutes, seconds. Okay. Okay, good. Very interesting. So I'm going to share with you the results. We have mostly representatives from the regional governments, but we also have from other levels of government, international organizations, and also many colleagues coming from the civil society, NGOs, and academia. So as Natalia was mentioning, Energy for Sea has this mission in this over 15 years of experience that we have, which is first to bring the voice and the position of regional governments to the global level. And at the same time, we do the other way around, which is helping these regional governments to implement, to review, and to establish targets and actions that would enable the implementation of these global agendas. Today, we are talking about the Sustainable Development Agenda, but of course, just to make it clear, Energy for Sea also works on other fields, for example, on climate change, following the UNFCCC agenda, and also biodiversity, following CBD, the New Urban Agenda, UNEA, and many others. So why are we focusing at this moment on the 2030 agenda? Well, it's a very broad agenda and it touches on many different themes. And it's true that most of the regional governments were already working on these fields even before the adoption of these goals. But we understand this agenda as a whole new opportunity. So to take advantage of this global momentum, regional governments can review how policymaking is done in their territories, and at the same time ensure an integration among the different thematic departments, ensure better coordination, and indeed just explore the many opportunities that are going to come because of these global efforts around the SDGs. So in general, what we are envisaging to do is really to increase the knowledge and promote the engagement of regional governments with this agenda. We believe that every kind of activity that we do, for example, this webinar, is already a step to raise awareness for regional governments to get to know this agenda and get to know the opportunities that they have. So we also are a hub to disseminate these experiences and of course in supporting the implementation doing that. And we are going to continue to advocate at the global level for the inclusion of regional governments and of course on the collaboration with them, because we know there are many international organizations out there developing projects on the implementation of the SDGs, and it's important they work with regional governments. Regional governments, as well as, of course, local governments, are directly recognized in the document that has set the 2030 agenda and has set the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. This is a specific paragraph where we are directly mentioned, but of course, and especially in the years after the adoption of the agenda, we know that we do definitely have a clear role on that, recognized internationally, considering these competencies that I mentioned before. And also considering this need to localize these SDGs and targets, and considering the diversity that we have within countries, we have to take a closer look into what each regional government and which local government are doing, and also be able to report back globally and nationally and at all levels what has been done. These are just to illustrate some of the few topics that are especially relevant in a territorial approach. Of course, the list can be even larger and involve many other elements, but these are some that we have identified that mostly our member regional governments are working on. So just to comment on the activities that Energy for Sea is developing on this field, we organize thematic and technical webinars like this one, and of course exchange opportunities among regional governments. We especially work a lot with Ouro, a very good partner of us, and of course UNDP, especially through UNDP Art, that is going to speak in a minute. We also are going to develop an integration between Energy for SD flagship initiatives, which are the Regions Adapt and the Regions for Biodiversity Learning platform, because we really feel that the SDGs provide this broad framework that we can work on many different fields, and it's very important that we start thinking how these different initiatives fit into that. We also, of course, are part of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments. And for example, on these exchanges that we organized, the previous years, we have been collecting lots of information from members. and especially with this group of regions, we have done some exercises in the past couple of years, and we have identified some of the common areas that members have been working on. For example, to cross the goals with their ongoing actions and plans, to see which action would contribute to achieving each of the goals, and that would enable them to define priorities. Some have been creating working groups. Others are already looking to indicators and mechanisms for follow-up. And of course, for the way ahead and what we have this year, Energy First is going to organize together with the province of Azuay, who is Energy First president for the South, in June from 19 to 22. International conference focusing on biodiversity, which will be held alongside Energy First General Assembly. And of course, we are going to touch some of the integration on the themes of the SDGs. And these moments, we usually explore them to also take the position, to come up with the position of regional governments to these main global events, for example, the COPs of both the Convention on Biological Diversity and the UNFCCC. Well, the main event at the global level to review the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the progress on the SDGs is the High-Level Political Forum. That's an event that is organized by ECOSOC, at least for these years. It will also be organized by the President of the General Assembly in some years. Well, this year, the HLPF, as we call it, is going to take place from 9 to 18 July under the topic Transformation Towards Sustainable and Resilient Societies. And for those who are not familiar, the HLPF on its first week focused on thematic reviews. And for this year, there is a specific set of goals that you can see on the screen that will be reviewed in details. And also during the second week, it's when central governments, the member states of the United Nations, are allowed to present their voluntary national reviews, which is expected to be built after a consultation process that is held nationally. Well, considering that SDG 11, that is focused on sustainable cities and communities, will be on the table this year, and also considering the growing importance of local and regional governments in the implementation of the whole 2030 agenda, the United Nations is organizing for the first time the Local and Regional Authorities Forum during the High-Level Political Forum. It's expected to take place on the 16th. As of this moment, we don't have many other details to share, but of course, especially for those that are working with us from our constituency member regional governments, we'll be providing as much support as we can to allow your participation in this important event. Well, I want to also comment with you that in 2017, Energy First has elaborated a report that was focusing on how much these voluntary national reviews were inclusive of regional governments. That is what you can see on your screen. And we had come with very interesting data. For example, that most of the governments that we had contact were aware their countries were presenting these voluntary national reviews. But at the same time, only half of them felt that they were able to contribute in those processes. This was the report and the exercise that we did last year. For this year, we want to do a more comprehensive exercise, and we want to take a look not only on how much voluntary national reviews have included regional governments, but we also want to know what regional governments are doing on the SDGs, and to give them this opportunity to report at the global level what are their good practices, what are their challenges, what they have been facing when it comes to the 2030 agenda. This report we are going to then launch at this high-level political forum, and we are going to develop it in collaboration with the University of Strathclyde in Scotland, and of course the always support of some colleagues from UNDP, Odofogar, and other organizations that we work with. The main way to collect the information that we are going to showcase in this report is going to be through a questionnaire. This questionnaire is currently open until the 13th of March. And it's important to mention that this questionnaire is not open only to Energy First the members. It's open for all regional governments in the world. And Of course, we sometimes do not reach all the regions in the road. That's why we also need your help and support. So if you are in touch with a regional government, you can share this opportunity with them and also connect them with us. We'd be glad to provide more information. Also, in the handout sessions of this webinar, you can find an open letter from Energy for Sea presidents inviting regional governments to complete this questionnaire, and also some instructions about how to do so. Of course, as a follow-up, we'll conduct some interviews, and then we're going to present this report, and which is also going to serve to us to identify some of the gaps and some of the challenges that are being faced by regional governments. And based on that, Energy for Sea is going to develop dedicated projects to support members on the implementation of the SDGs, building especially on this exchange exercise that we are currently doing, but more specifically as the needs come. So this is for especially for you to understand what is coming ahead, and especially for regional governments this year, 2018. And I know that especially UNDP Art has been working a lot on the localization process, including with some tools and some mechanisms that they can explore in this regard. And then I definitely would like to thank in advance for the participation of our colleague Gemma Aguado, who has been supporting us a lot in this process. Gemma, I'm going to give you the presenter role so you can share your presentation that I know you have prepared. And Gemma is going to share with us a little bit her work with UNDP Art on some of the opportunities that regional governments can have in this process. Hello, Gemma, welcome. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks to you, Rodrigo. Hi everyone. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to all of you. I think you can see the screen now, right? Or do I?
We can see it. If you could just make it full screen, I think it would be easier.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to do. But let me see. Now, okay,
yes,
excellent.
There you go.
Great.
Thank you.
So thanks again, Rodrigo. As you were just saying, I am here representing UNDP, in particular the ART initiative, which is a global program of UNDP focused on promoting local governance and local development. Actually, well, ART, our name comes from articulation of territorial network, so you can more or less, by the name, imagine the focus of our work. And as Rodrigo was saying, we have been working closely with a number of local and regional governments in the past, and of course the associations, always with the approach of multi-level governance, because of course from UNDP we also work very closely with national governments. We participate in the global dialogues and processes. We participate or we work very closely with civil society, private sector, etc. So I've been requesting to provide a few ideas, a few if you speak about the key areas or the main components of the localization process, the localization of the SDGs. I know that after me there will be presentations like practical examples from the Basque Country, Catalonia, Sao Paulo. So I'm sure that they are going to complement my presentation, which is going to be a bit more theoretical if you want, because then we will have the practical experiences. But let me perhaps start by saying a few words on the localization, because I imagine that most of you, I share the same vision as most of you, but still we find that in many occasions it's not very clear the concept of localizing. So just for all of us to be on the same page, what do we understand for localization? We understand a process of not only applying or not only translating the national policies at local level, but it's mostly about putting the focus in the territories and the people. So putting the territories and their people at the center of development. And as I was saying before, of course, always in a logic of multi-level governance in coordination with the national level, with the global processes. So we are taking the territories, as I was saying, as the main focus of our work. And here you can see very, very clear the link with the territorial approach that Rodrigo was also mentioning before. What do we understand by territorial approach? Territorial approach understanding as a methodology, a type of development that promotes multidimensional and multi-actor strategies, and that is basically seeking to unlock the potential of the territories, the internal resources. So you can more or less see that when we are talking about territory, we are not really thinking of a geographical area, of a particular geographical area, but rather we are thinking about that space where the citizens meet public policies and the other way around, where the public policies must respond to citizens' needs. At the same time, also the territorial approach, and this is interesting because it links directly with the SDGs, with the Sustainable Development Goals. The territorial approach includes already the different dimensions of the territory. So as we were saying, the physical aspects, but also the environmental one, the cultural one, and the social and economic. Let me also perhaps share with you some of the key steps that we consider are important for the localization of the SDGs, and this is based on our own experiences accompanying a number of territories in their own process of implementing the SDGs, the Agenda 2030 at local level. First, we are convinced that raising awareness is still very necessary, and it's a first crucial steps because of course, nobody can really feel ownership of an agenda if we are not really familiar with it. And therefore, when we are talking about raising awareness, we are in particular referring to the importance of advocating for the specific role of subnational governments in the implementation of the SDGs. As Rodrigo was mentioning before, the Agenda 2030, of course, it represents a huge effort, and it has 17 very clear goals. But at the same time, it's not about reinventing the wheel. We are not talking about anything that the local and regional governments are not doing already in the in their day-to-day work, right? So we are talking about health, we are talking about gender equality, education, access to water, and so many other things that are basically under the direct responsibility of local and regional governments. So first, very clear, raising awareness. Then, of course, it's important to have a clear diagnosis of or a needs assessment of our priorities and needs in a particular territory. And according to that, to identify our strategies and plans. And here we are not talking about developing complete new plans. We are actually talking about how to better reflect or how to mainstream the SDGs into the urban plans, the local plans, the development plans that a particular city, municipality, province, region can already have. Let me perhaps stop here a moment on the strategies and plans, and then I will go back again to the steps. But I think it will be perhaps of interest for you because many different territories are now sorry, let me just move this. Okay. Many territories are now fully involved in this process of looking at the SDGs, looking at the Agenda 2030, and at the same time reviewing their local plans, or actually in the process of building a new plan because the previous one is already obsolete. So in our perspective, when we are talking about local planning processes and SDGs, we are not thinking that much of taking our plan, taking the SDGs and making just a mere box ticking exercise saying, okay, these are the goals and this is my plan, and I have actually, you know, I'm covering 15 of the 17 goals in my plan. That is not that much the idea. What we think that it will be really impactful and effective would be to actually take the SDGs, take the Agenda 2030 as an opportunity to critically review the planning processes that we are conducting in our different territories. And for example, you can see here in the screen, we have a number of principles that have inspired actually the Agenda 2030. The Agenda 2030 is universal. It's no longer for a number of countries, but it's actually for all the member states that have signed and have approved the agenda. It's inclusive. inclusive, and actually the logo or the motto of the agenda is leaving no one behind. It's based on multi-stakeholder partnerships and the need of including all different actors in the implementation of the agenda, because otherwise it's not going to really be have an impact in the territories. It's transformative because it looks at the root causes and not only at the symptoms or at the effects. And it's of course multidimensional with all these different dimensions that we were mentioning before. So what we think could be really interesting is from the perspective of a local or regional government, taking the principles of the SDGs and doing a critical review of our planning processes, seeing, for example, if my development plan, if my local plan or if my regional plan is actually inclusive. For example, during the process, have I included those groups that are traditionally marginalized? Is my planning process, has my plan process really taken into account the main causes of the problems that I want to solve with my plan? So is my plan really transformative, or am I only looking at the consequences, at the impacts of a particular problem? Am I really applying a multidimensional approach to my planning process? Am I really taking into account the different components, and am I really covering all the different priorities and needs of my territory? So as you see, we are accompanying a number of local and regional governments in this reflection process, and at the end of the day, taking the principles of the SDGs as an opportunity to reinforce and strengthen the process that you are in any case conducting in your territories. So this with regards to strategies and plans, and then of course it's very important the part of monitoring and evaluation of really having a set of indicators that are adapted at local level. And then obviously all the part of capacity strengthening. I will mention a bit afterwards some of the tools that we are either elaborating from UNDP or supporting other partners to do it. I also wanted to share with you a few ideas on some of the key features that we think are important when we are talking about enabling environments for localizing the SDGs, because it's of course not only the different steps that one particular government needs to undertake to localize the SDGs, but also it's looking at our institutional arrangements and what are the characteristics that these institutional arrangements normally need to have in order for a real and effective SDG localization. First of all, there's a multi-level governance that we were mentioning before, and the articulation at a vertical level, the multi-stakeholder approach, and the articulation at horizontal level, and including all the different stakeholders and partners that are operating in a territory. The accountability, of course, the visibility, the accountability, the transparency. And then finally, another important component is the development cooperation effectiveness. So it's actually aligning in a more effective way the actions that a number of partners, development partners, are present perhaps in my territory, so that we ensure that these development partners are really responding to my priorities and my needs in the territory, and not the other way around, right? I would also like to invite you to visit the platform that we have put together with UN Habitat and the Global Task Force for Local and Regional Governments. It's the localizingthesdgs.org. And here we are trying to share experiences and share tools to respond to some of the challenges of the SDGs. Here you can see, well, there are a number of, if you go online, you will see that the website has a number of different areas, so to speak. Here in the Discover tools, you can find a number of guidance note tools, mechanisms that can support you in the process of localizing the SDGs. For example, if we talk about raising awareness, you will find a roadmap for localizing the SDGs that was produced by the by the Global Task Force, also with our support, where you can find further information on all these different steps. You can also find, if we talk about strengthening capacities, we are also developing a number of training modules with also UCLG and Habitat, training modules basically aiming or targeting local and regional governments, but not only, that we have already conducted in 10, 15 different places with actually quite very positive results. First training module is on the basics of the localization of the SDGs. Second training module is on planning processes and the SDGs. And there will be also soon a third module coming, and so on and so forth. So I would like to invite you to visit the platform, to also share your experiences, because the idea of this platform was to really create a space where the different partners and the different territories could exchange their experiences. So I would like to invite all of you to visit the website, to share your experiences, and hopefully we will have further information from what all of you are already doing in the localization of the SDGs. Rodrigo, if you agree, I would like to perhaps stop here, because I know that other colleagues are coming now, and I will be looking forward to your questions and answers. So I would stop here, and perhaps later we have an opportunity to discuss. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Emma. Very interesting presentation. And we are very glad that UNDP Art is working a lot in this topic and is giving special attention to the localization of the SDGs. It's Energy First the intention to continue to be working with UNDP Art, and especially to explore some tools that we could support members, give to members that could help them in their own efforts to implement the SDGs. As Gemma has mentioned, there are some elements that we have been identifying as, well, mostly significant to pursue the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in regional governments. And based on those, we'd like to ask your opinion. What, in your view, would be among this list that we are proposing below, which do you consider the most important for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and SDGs in regional governments? While you reply this question, this poll on your screen, are we already share the presenter role with my colleague Estivalis from the government of Basque Country, and she can set her presentation. Well, in advance, I'd like very much to thank you, Estivalis, for all the support and friendship in this process. We are very happy to see how much the Basque Country is engaged in the implementation of this agenda. And because of that, and how much we were inspired by your actions, that we decided to invite you to become a presenter today in this webinar. Welcome, Estivalis.
Good afternoon. I don't know if you can see my presentation.
Yeah, we are still with the poll. I'm gonna allow just 10 more seconds to receive other responses from colleagues.
Okay.
And right after that, we should be able to see your poll. I'm sorry, your presentation. Okay, I'm gonna close the poll and share the results with you. So most of you, the most answered question was that the main element would be the means of implementation, thinking about financing and capacity building. But it's interesting to see we have also responses in all the other elements, because indeed it's gonna require a very broad action to work on this agenda with many different steps. So with those in mind, now I think that we should be able to see, let me see. Okay, there you go. Now we can see your presentation. So with you, Estivalis, thank you very much for joining again. We are very excited to hear from the Basque Country experience.
So, good afternoon, and thank you to Energy First for inviting us to this webinar, a place to exchange ideas and processes to implementation of Agenda 2030 from sub-state government in that case. So I am Estíbaliz Urzelay from Foreign Affairs Department of the Basque Government at the Presidency. So I will explain our concrete process in the implementation of Agenda 2030. Just let me show you some figures about the Basque Country for those who doesn't know nothing about our country. So we are 2 million inhabitants, 3 levels of governments, 3 provinces, 251 municipalities, 2 official languages. We have an employment about 12%, and the 70% of our budget is directed going to the social issues. It's a highly industrialized region, specialized and internationalized industrialized region, and we have a hard solidarity territory, and it's a high social commitment from civil society or public sector or enterprise, and of course we have a fiscal autonomy policy also. So why I'm explaining this? Maybe it's obvious for some of you, but Gemma Aguado also has mentioned. We think that each territory has to develop its own path to 2030 agenda, taking into account its circumstances. It sounds obvious, but it's very important for us to take this on mind. We understand in the Basque Country the institutional architecture has to lead on multi-level governance and shared responsibilities, because the 17 objectives of the 2030 agenda have direct and indirect goals that has a relation with direct tasks of the regional government, who are responsible, and the local government, who are policy responsible at the best level to link objectives and the community's needs. So intermediary governments, like Basque Country and Basque government, has the capacity and the competencies to create synergies for planning, from managing, and the mandate and responsibility to development, to the sustainability, to the social cohesion. So in our case, we took, the importance of knowing this institutional and the stakeholders context it was important for us. In 2016, in the Basque Country were elections, and we took this year as an opportunity for mapping in the implementation of the SDGs, for mapping where we are. Sorry, I think it was here. Where we are, who we are, who we work with, which tools we have on the implementation of agenda. So we look to our institutional architecture, and we notice that we have the capacity and authority via the institutional bodies that we give to us, an executive and legislative framework, but also a budget. This fiscal autonomy gives us the capacity and authority, but also we have stakeholders for change. Public, private, academia, civil society, networks, research centers, technology centers, development agency. So we look to the articulation tools to support on. We have the institutional bodies, like an interinstitutional commission, where those 3 levels of government are taking part or having meetings. We have also a Finance Basque Council or Interdepartmental Commission inside the Basque government. And also we have the stakeholders to implement such this agenda, such as a Science and Technology Basque Network or public agencies in different sectors or clusters or civil society community, like community councils. So we know that this institutional complexity and shared action framework is not easy framework, but is the only way, and that we have mapping that in the very first steps. So the steps taken in the Basque government. 2030 agenda we see as the best tool to improve our public policy. In 2016, our president's investiture speech already set the commitment of the Basque government or the Basque Country to not one left behind. And we start taking some steps simultaneously. I mean, not okay. We start making awareness, raising, capacity building, training, disseminations by organizing different events in with a multi-dimension or multi-stakeholders events, capacity building to public officers, or publications making raising awareness about the Agenda 2030 agenda. We notice that the people doesn't aware of that, or the knowledge about that. It was very, very low. Also, we work including all the stakeholders, sector or levels on the debate, all the different sectors of the society to the debate. But also we work, or we bring all those alliance networks abroad that we have, like FOGAR or LBSN, REDS, Energy for SD, and we make contact with them, and just to share our experiences and just to learn also from them. And also UNDP Art, knowing those tools they have, and sharing with them our experiences, our process. But also with different regions, regions inside Spain or regions abroad. Okay, and finally, we start as a Basque government aligning our government program. As I said, it was an opportunity because for us to start that, because we were starting a new legislative term. So it was a very nice time to do it. That on February 2017, the presentation it was the presentation of the government program. And there it was, I mean, the government program is our commitment to the Basque society as a Basque government. So this government program is highly inspired on Agenda 2030. It has 4 pillars, like it's employment, equal integration and social cohesion, cohabitation and self-governance. It has 10 axes, 50 objectives, 15 strategic plans, and all are related to the 5 Ps. Person, you know, the 5 Ps of Agenda 2030, and it's we have also in the this government program a governance model based on transparency, assessment, and accountability. So we notice also that we are not starting from zero. We have the know-how coming from the MDGs and development cooperation, and also from Rio +20. And in the Basque Country also we have a long history of cross-cutting on sustainable development policies, like example social cohesion or gender issues or issues in environment. So it was a decision of pushing the SDGs or the Agenda 2030 on the leadership from the presidency, and in concrete from this Foreign Affairs Department in collaboration with our colleagues of the Coordination Department. This department is also in presidency, and is I mean it makes they made a coherence of those strategic plans in the whole government. So on September 2017, in the general policy debate in front of the Basque Parliament, our president, Alenda Cari, remembered the commitment of the Basque Country to 2030 agenda, and that the government's program is going to be aligned to this agenda, and also announced the adoption of an agenda, Euskadi Basque Country 2030. So we are now finalizing the draft first agenda, Euskadi Basque Country 2030. This agenda is made matching or linking those 70 objectives and 100 goals of the 2030 agenda with about 100 goals or commitments of the government's program, with 66 planification tools that we have already, and 15 legislative initiatives and 51 indicators. So that permits to link effectively our public policies with the Agenda 2030, and that will be also a sense of a vast contribution to Agenda 2030, because we think that the Agenda 2030, we say, is the tool that makes us improve our public policies. It doesn't say us what to do, but it helps to define those priorities and taking into account our territorial reality. So just to conclude, I think I will say that, of course, to know it's important to know our context and the stakeholders we have already, and where how to implement in this implementation of the Agenda 2030. It's also important to the political commitments and leadership from maybe in our case it has been from presidency in a go ahead from I think from development cooperation or environment sector, not sectorial approach, and also including in the debate all the stakeholders we have in the territory. And of course, not create new tools. We notice in this mapping that we have instruments, we have tools, so just we are going to use them and to make this, put this Agenda 2030 in the middle. So for conclude, some challenges, well, it's not a new challenge, new ideas, but I mean, we have to this Agenda 2030 saying to us that we have to work in a different way. So it will be a work of breaking silos. There is hard work also in awareness and in knowledge about the SDGs, and also to put in the international arena the sub-state government's presence or participation and our role. So I will stop also here, and I let them, the people just asking questions if they have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Estibaliz, for this amazing presentation. It's very interesting to see the path that was taken by the Basque Country, starting with the training and the raising awareness among the staff, among the public, the civil servants, the public employees. Also doing some consultations and doing this effort in aligning ongoing actions with the SDGs to see where there is correspondence and where there should be extra work. And especially, like that you said, to take advantage of some of the existing tools that you already have and not to overburden the government administration. And to, for example, I know that you, through the presidency, have been using some existing commissions to also enable this dialogue, this coordination between the different ministries that compose the Basque government. That is going to be very crucial for the implementation of this agenda. I just would like to remind our colleagues that in case you have questions, either for Estibaliz on the case of Basque Country or for Gemma Aguado that presented just previously from UNDP Art, you can do that through the chat box. Just type in your questions and we are going to read them out once we move into the question and answer segment. Now, let me also share my screen. Just give me a sec. Oh, I have to make myself presenter again. Wait. Okay. Okay, there you go. Now our idea, and as Estibaliz was mentioning just now, is really to allow other regional governments to explain how it was that they addressed the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, if they are at all working on this regard, because as we know, there are different approaches that we can choose. And of course, considering the specific circumstances of each of the regions, they're gonna need a different methodology or a different aspect. I'm going to start with Sao Paulo and will be followed by Catalonia. But I see as well that we have some other member regional governments connected. I, for example, acknowledge the participation of Goias with João and Nelda, also from over in Ronalp with Sandrine. I see also some governments that are not particularly members of Energy for Sea, but work with us, from example, the province of Manabí in Ecuador. And in case that you would also like to take the floor and share in a maximum of 5 minutes each what you have been doing on the SDGs, just please send us a message on the chat box saying that you'd like to comment. And after these initial respondents, we are gonna move to you. So I know that Sao Paulo is doing a very interesting work, especially developing new ways of using indicators, working with their own statistical office, also develop partnerships with universities, working at the national level, coordinating with other regional governments, the states as they call. So I'm very, very excited to hear a little bit more from the colleagues from Sao Paulo. I can see we have some colleagues connected, and I will unmute Isabella, who works, well, from the governor's office in the International Relations Advisory. And I know that them, together with other departments in the Sao Paulo government, are leading on this agenda. So Isabella, I haven't muted you. I think you have to unmute yourself. And yes, there you go. Let me see if I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much for joining and for taking the time to share with us, Isabella.
Thank you for giving us the time to share it, our work here. So yeah, as you mentioned, yes, we've been doing a lot of work in monitoring and evaluation and diagnosing the gaps. So our statistical agency has been working to analyzing all the programs from all secretariats of the state to realize where we have gaps on SDGs and where we're at, we need some effort, and which SDGs were further ahead. And they'll be presenting this work soon. So it should be fine. The online platform should be, will expose all this progress in an online platform that will be launched at the end of this month. We're also coordinating, like you said, with we have an intersecretariat working group. So we meet regularly to coordinate with all secretariats on the agenda of where they've been working. And we also take this opportunity to provide capacity building and workshops. So far we've had 2. We'll have a 3rd workshop on the next Monday. And during the last workshop, we also conducted a survey to understand where which skills the other secretariats felt they were lacking on SDGs. So first of all, it was the diagnosis of issue areas. So we'll be presenting the platform next Monday for them. And also project structuring and project management was also something on SDGs, was also something they mentioned they were lacking. So they wanted to know more about. So we'll make sure to invite people from civil society who are experts on the subject and from academia to work and to present on these matters. Another interesting thing that I think I haven't mentioned before, even at the forum, we need to complete that because we just finalized the partnership. We're working with the Quebec office in Sao Paulo to bring an intern working from Quebec who will be working for 3 months here to bring SDGs to the municipalities and to bring experts from Quebec to Sao Paulo to work on the SDGs together. So we have that exchange going on as well. And last, we're also working on the subnational commission of the SDGs. It's currently at the Secretariat of Planning for approval, but we're confident that it should be approved soon and will include civil society. And we're working on with the UN Global Compact on this as well. So many news to come. And we're also working with the schools. So we want to make sure that we raise awareness in the public school system. We've we'll launch apps with books and activities on SDGs soon, and we also have a project going with comic books to make sure, and a writing contest among public school systems. And we're also coordinating with international actors, so many networks, and we'll host the World Economic Forum in Latin America, and we're making sure that SDGs are included. We'll have experts talking about SDGs there. And I guess I want it to be brief, but this is a great overview of what we've been doing. Okay, there's also, I forgot to mention, there's also SDG Lab that we're organizing at the end of this month with civil society and academia to address refugees in the SDG agenda. As you know, we've had quite a great inflow of refugees, well, not as much as our colleagues in Europe might be having, but also a significant one for Sao Paulo. So we want to make sure they're not excluded from the SDG agenda. And I guess this would be our main goal, is that we'll have changes in government soon. So we want to make sure all of these actions are institutionalized, so we can have a long-term planning that goes through the next year with the next government. I guess this would be it. Any questions about it?
Thank you very much, Isabella. Really, really congratulations. I can see that some of the elements you have had a similar approach as the presentation we just heard from Basque Country, for example, in building the capacities among the public staff, the civil servants of the government. And that's also interesting because it allows mainstreaming of the SDGs across all the different thematic areas. Also, very excited to see how your indicators framework is going to look like on the SDG Lab, the apps. Very good, and I'll definitely be in touch with you to find out more, to make sure we showcase you, portray you well in the report we are going to do for the High Level Political Forum, and also, of course, to further explain to other members the actions that you are doing that perhaps could help them in this process. Yes, you can also, for the other attendees, if you have questions specifically for the case of Sao Paulo, you can also type them in the chat box, and once we finish this section, we are going to read some of them. Now I'd like to move back again to Europe to hear the case from colleagues from Catalonia. They are today represented by their Advisory Council on Sustainable Development. They are making use of that mechanism that they already had to coordinate their agenda. I know they have very exciting actions also ongoing and planning some public consultations in the near future. So I'd like to invite Raquel Ballesteros to share a little bit with us how the Catalan agenda in this regard works, also in comparison to what the other colleagues from Sao Paulo and Basque Country have just shared. Hello, Raquel.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, yes, we can hear you and see you.
Okay, great.
I understand you also had some slides prepared.
Yeah, I do. Okay, let me just... All right. Well, thank you very much to Energy for SD for organizing this webinar, and also for letting us to present as well what we are doing here in Catalonia with the implementation of the 2030 agenda. I'll be brief as well, and I will comment how the work we have done. First of all, in the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development, which is where I work, we prepare an expert report on localizing the SDGs in Catalonia. And this report, which is available in the material that the Energy for SD has provided for the webinar, and also in the CAT's website, the report was elaborated by the members of the Council with the contribution of more than 60 external experts and stakeholders. And the report includes a preliminary international and European diagnosis for every SDG, followed by an exhaustive target-by-target Catalan diagnosis, which serve to identify the overall challenges for meeting each SDG in Catalonia. With this, on the basis of CAT's report, the Catalan government has designed an overall strategy for the implementation of the 2030 agenda in Catalonia. There are two levels set, one a political level in which there is a commission with all secretaries general who coordinates the elaboration of the strategy, and it will approve the final proposal to be delivered to the government. And there is also another level which is more technical, a technical committee, which operates on the basis of 17 interdepartmental working groups, one for each SDG. And every SDG working group is composed of technical staff, and it's coordinated by the department which holds the key competencies on that SDG. So here you have all the coordinator departments that we have for all SDGs. For example, for SDG 1, it's the Department of Labor, Social Affairs and Families, who is coordinating this working group. For SDG 7 is the Department of Business and Knowledge, and for SDG 13 is the Department of Territorial and Sustainability, and so on. So with this this methodology, with these SDG working groups, we have tried to contribute to break silos by promoting synergy work, and boosting holistic visions. So, for example, here we have this picture with the SDG working group 3 on health, which the Department of Health is the coordinator, and then other departments have been involved, like education, territorial and sustainability, foreign affairs, business and knowledge, labor, social affairs, and economy and finance. So in this way, we have created a sense of sharing responsibilities on SDGs. And some departments we were not traditionally involved in sustainability, like economy or business and knowledge, they have been involved this time. So with through the work of these working groups, a first draft has been elaborated, and it has been delivered half a year ago. This first draft, what it does is an alignment between the 2030 agenda targets and all the public policies in Catalonia. And we wanted to go a bit further, and we have translated the global targets into over 750 specific commitments of the government of Catalonia. So we like the word commitment rather than target, because commitment, it has a sense that it leads to action. And this draft also sets deadlines and specifies the departments in charge for each commitment. And these commitments are to take place inside, but also outside Catalonia, responding then to the global and local dimensions of the agenda. So here we have a couple of examples of these commitments. For example, for SDG 1, here in Catalonia, we have established a universal guaranteed minimum income to fight against poverty. And for SDG 3, we have a law which for the universal access to public health. Apart from that, the Catalan government has worked as well on the dissemination of the 2030 agenda. What we have done is to be also aligned with the high-level political forum of the United Nations that Rodrigo before presented as the main forum in the international forum for SDGs. So before this forum, the Catalan government organizes seminars focused on the SDGs to be analyzed that year. And these seminars we invite experts and stakeholders which participate in roundtables. And the seminars are going to be as well displayed for the SDGs, which are going to be analyzed on the high-level political forum of this year. And after that, we have summaries on all the summaries, videos, and presentations available in our website, in the CAT's website. And as next steps, we are working on a public participation process, which is going to take place around Catalonia during the second half of this year. We expect all the stakeholders to be involved. And also a task force will work in a set of indicators and a monitoring framework for the achievement of the SDGs in Catalonia. And well, just to wrap up, we just want to insist that the government of Catalonia is strongly committed to the achievement of 2030 agenda. We believe that by transforming Catalonia, we might improve the world, that this is our mission. And we are willing to create alliance with partners, because we believe that through these partnerships, we can make sure that no one is left behind. So, well, this is a brief presentation. Thank you very much. And I'm open also to any question that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Very nice also to hear the experience in Catalonia. I also wanted to comment with colleagues that one of the documents in the handout session is the assessment report that Catalonia has developed last year, which identifies a little bit the key priorities and some of the gaps that their whole government have identified in the different areas that the SDGs cover. Thank you a lot for sharing that. As we can see, we can definitely identify some common pattern among the presentations. Of course, we can see that each of them are giving different attention to different kinds of mechanisms, but in general, we can see that all of them are really focusing on this thing about integrating, coordinating the agenda with all the different department, ministries, and secretariats that compose the administration. Also doing this matchmaking among the SDGs and ongoing actions. That's also going to be important. Also make sure that no resources are wasted and we can adapt whatever is going on and review and improve policymaking according to this global agenda. We also were expecting a presentation from Azuay, from the government of Azuay in Ecuador, but I can see that unfortunately they had some technical issues and were not unable to connect. Let's hope they can still join us in this remaining minutes that we have. I also am looking especially colleagues from the government of Goias with João. I know that Goiás has been doing a very beautiful pilot project with some of the municipal governments in their territory to support them in the development of their own SDGs plans. And we do have some questions. Perhaps I will move now to questions and answers, and in case some of the government's president would like to take the floor, we can call you and unmute you. So we do have some questions here. Let me open the question panel. For example, we have especially some questions dedicated to Basque Country, to Estivalis. Estivalis, there are some people asking if you could elaborate a little bit more what you meant by the silos approach that you have identified as one of the challenges for in the implementation of the SDGs in the Basque Country. And also in regards to the planning, you mentioned you have been aligning the SDGs with this planning that you have up to 2020, and they are asking if it's compulsory for you to have this medium-term and long-term planning, or if that is up to the decision of your own government.
Thank you so much for the questions. Coming to the silos is obviously a challenge in the Basque government or in public service. We work with sectors, and this agenda told us that we have to match all the that we make in one department makes sense in another, and we have to match our policies, and it's important to work in this policy coherence. So we are still working on planning like silos. So this is a challenge for us, and we noticed that when we are starting making this match of the strategic plans inside the Basque Country. So on this, I didn't understand the second question.
Yeah, it's just that it was Patricia Almeida who asked. I think she's probably Brazilian as well. She's mentioning that in the case of the Brazilian states, it's mandatory, it's an obligation from the regional governments to, by law, to develop their medium-term planning, but I understand probably not a long-term one. And she wanted to understand in the case of the Basque Country that you said that you're first aligning the SDGs with this medium, let's call it medium-term planning up to 2020, and also developing a strategy until 2013. If you, I believe if she's asking if you're doing this because it's an obligation, or why did you decide to take that?
No, I mean, as Basque government, this draft agenda Euskadi Basque Country 2030, that call, of course, it will take just the medium term. I mean, we can't make commitments. We have a 4 years term program, so we are starting from that. But those it means like we are working in a way of working together. So even if it's this agenda that we are launching in maybe in the next month or 2 months, it will take from this term. I mean, from 2017 to 2020.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Estivaliz. We have been receiving some very interesting questions, and before moving to them, I heard from our colleagues from Goiás, from João, and João said he'd like to comment a little bit how the state of Goiás in Brazil is addressing the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. João, I'm going to unmute you. Welcome. Very glad to hear from you.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to listen from you, the experience in Sao Paulo, Catalonia, Basque, and so on. And here you are concentrating. It's like a pilot project in the region of Alto Paraíso. It's the northeast of the state, and we are working. It's a kind of innovative work in Brazil, in the state of Goiás, because you are fostering the dialogue between the municipality and the state and other technical agencies, offices in the state. So it has been a good exercise of the dialogue. At the same time, we're beginning to make the population more aware about the project as a whole, and it's very motivating to listen, guys. Your experience too. You feel more strengthened for that. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, João. Also very happy to hear how things are going on the SDGs in Goiás. We're definitely gonna keep an eye out to find out more how those efforts develop. There could be very interesting cases also to inspire other regional governments. We do have some questions here, particularly related to Brazilian regional governments, and especially then I'm gonna ask Isabella to react. One of the colleagues is asking, she's asking, because Energy for SD has some member regional governments in Brazil, for example, Goiás, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro. But of course, she feels that this is one-by-one approach, so it would be a doc approach in supporting them in the implementation of the SDGs. She wants to know if there are any mechanisms at the national level, at the Brazilian level, that put all the regional governments there in contact and in collaboration to implement the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. At the same time, and before you comment on that, or one of your colleagues from Sao Paulo, Tony from Catalonia is asking if there is any link available to the online platform that you mentioned that you are going to launch, or any of the other initiatives that you mentioned that they could find additional information. Well, in any case, if there is any links, we would be glad to include that in the information that we circulate with the attendees after the webinar. So I don't know if Isabella, you or anyone else from Sao Paulo would like to reply this question in regards to the collaboration among all regional governments in Brazil.
Hi, Rodrigo. Yeah, there is a national commission on the SDGs, and it has representatives from civil society, from local governments. They're about to launch the plan on the implementation of the SDGs. It will be launched on March 1st. Goiás is actually I think they could answer a little bit better, because they are the ones who are participating as local governments, but also Bianca could speak a little bit about the works, because she's usually the Secretariat of the Environment, is usually the ones that goes with Goiás through ABIMA, which is the Association of Brazilian States on the Environment. So I think I can maybe pass to, maybe she wants to add anything, something about it. Bianca, do you want to talk a little bit about the National Commission on the SDGs?
Não consigo falar agora.
Well, yeah, I hear that Bianca is unable to speak at this moment. But no worries. I understand. Yeah.
We have a national commission, and they have been meeting soon, and we have state representation in there, and they're about to launch the implementation plan on March 1st. We will have more. We can share the implementation plan with you once we have it, once it is launched soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Isabella. I hope that clarifies the question. Indeed, the association that you mentioned, ABEMA, the Brazilian Association of State Environmental Authorities, is also a member of Energy First T. And so we do know that there are some mechanisms for the collaboration among the regional governments there. But I know that especially the National Commission was interesting to elaborate the voluntary national review of Brazil that was presented last year. And in that regard, we received a very interesting question here from Arthur Getz Escudero. He's asking how the regional governments are interacting this national voluntary reviews process. Especially this year, he's pointing out Spain is going to present their voluntary review at the high-level political forum, and particularly to the Basque Country in Catalonia. How is this communication and coordination with the Spanish government going in regards to the voluntary review? I don't know who would like to comment on that first. I know that Estebalis had mentioned that some meetings were organized. Perhaps Estebalis can start, and then we can see if Raquel has any other comments.
Yes, indeed. Well, we know that there is a national level high. I can't say in English right now, but a high group of from the Spanish government. Political group, but also they are asking for the regions of Spain, calling them to make some meetings. They have had the first meeting on December, and right now they have already take place on February another one, and on January another one, and I guess in March there will be the third one. And they are calling all the regions of Spain to share their experiences or whatever. But well, from the Basque government, we are open to those meetings to share our experience with the central state, but nothing concrete has created or has offered from the national government. Indeed, that's the only way. I know.
Thank you very much, Steve. Very, very nice to hear the feedback on that. That is also one of the points we are going to address in the report Energy First is going to launch at the High-Level Political Forum. I don't know if Raquel from Catalonia would like to also comment anything on the national review.
Yes, well, I have the same information than Estivali, that there is this high-level group from the Spanish government, and that they are collecting some information. They are organizing some meetings to see what the regions are doing. But as Estivali says, I don't have more information about any concrete action. What I'd like to say as well is that the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development of Catalonia takes part of a European network of advisory councils like us. And through this network, we are observers in the EU high-level multi-stakeholder platform for the implementation of the SDGs in the European Union. And it's a way to know how the European Union is working to implement the agenda in Europe. So that's also something important that we can get access to. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Yeah, I know that it's in some cases can be a difficult process, especially in a short time, because I think that they have some 6 to 9 months to elaborate the national reports and present to the United Nations. And of course, it's voluntary, so they decided when to do it. But I definitely recommend the publication that we, Energy First, launched last year in 2017. It's available in our website, and it contains some recommendations to national governments about how they could improve, to the central governments, how they could improve their process of consultation with regional governments. And especially we have commended the process that had been adopted by Belgium, that had a very open process to include the regional governments in their contents. The regional governments were including co-authors of the Belgian report. And also the publication of Energy First also commends the case of Kenya, because Kenya also established one commission that organized several meetings. And it was especially interesting because they did a post-draft validation. So they first wrote the report, and then they organized another meeting to make sure that the regional government, civil society, and other actors were in agreement with the contents. Thank you very much for that question. We also have one additional question from the colleagues from Auvergne Rhône-Alpes. Also, I think I can see it interests other colleagues as well. How the regional governments here present, I see that they are engaged at very high level with their governor's office, their president's office. How did you manage to engage the political level, the high levels in this agenda? So how did you convince them of the importance of working on the 2030 agenda? This question is open to all the regional governments here present to comment, especially those already working on this agenda. I don't know if Estivaliz would like to mention how was this process of getting the support of the president, and then Sao Paulo maybe how it was to involve the governor's team on this agenda. Perhaps I'm going to start with Estivaliz. We can hear also from Raquel.
Well, indeed, this is a slow process, but of course the commitment of our president is the top political level, and making the push of Agenda 2030 put in the presidency makes awareness and makes something in all the political responsibles. But I think it's we are starting not pressing anybody, and we are also we think from the Basque government also that this is a process of all the stakeholders, not just the public sector who is leading, but also a multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholders task. So also this pressing or lobbying from another sectors of the Basque society makes the politicians take this commitment in their task. But I mean, everybody can press in that way. And from the Basque government inside, well, we have started, as I mentioned, slowly, not making compulsory for anybody, just taking into account those tools that we have in those institutional commissions, where are politicians, where are technical people, and that's all. It's in that way that we work.
Thank you, Steve. Very, very nice advice to, well, not create new elements and just make use of the existing ones. That's definitely attractive to political level. I don't know if other colleagues would also like to comment on this question. Raquel, perhaps you'd like to say something?
Yeah, well, I would just like to mention that in the government plan approved in April 2016, it was included already by the government of Catalonia to prepare a sustainable development goals plan and also an integrated system of targets and indicators. So this made easy our task to promote the plan for the implementation of the agenda. So yeah, and then after, as I mentioned before, we have these two levels, like a high-level political committee, which is the one who must decide and approve the final proposal of the technical committee of the plan. So there are these two levels working in cooperation.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Very nice to hear as well the experience in Catalonia. Looking to the colleagues from Sao Paulo, just in case they'd like to comment, if it was easy to mobilize these resources and to get the approval of the governor, if you have any advice to other regional governments that could be facing any difficulties in that process about how to engage the political level in this process.
I think I can add that it was very important for us to have a decree from the governor that says that creates the Intersecretariat working group, because it gave us the autonomy to talk to all secretariats and gather representatives from all of them and involve the entire government. It's been a slow but really steady process. So right now, most of the secretariats are involved and they understand the importance of being involved and coordinate actions to avoid silos. So I guess that the institutional framework was important for us, and it still is. Once we create the subnational commission, it will be even more important.
Well, thanks. Thanks a lot. I think that especially in the case of Sao Paulo and many other regional governments, that is true. They have been engaged with the SDGs even before the SDGs were defined, because, well, this is a very long-term process that's coming from the Earth Summit in Rio in '92, and then the Rio +20 to, well, actually define the process to pursue these SDGs, and then the summit in 2015 to establish the SDGs. So I think that taking a look at this past is also a good way of convincing authorities to engage in this agenda. I mean, this is not a work that is starting today. You have been thinking about how to contribute to sustainable development in general for many years, and this is our opportunity to give it a structure and organize better the ideas, coordinate the secretariats. So I think that's also very good advice. Thank you very much. In case other colleagues from other regional governments would also like to comment, please just send us a message. Okay, we also have another question from Artur. Artur, perhaps you could, I'm gonna unmute you. Perhaps you could read it out, your question, if that is okay for you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, my question is to really take advantage of the particularly strategic elements that are emerging in the coming cluster of the SDGs that are under review. How can we take the integrated territorial approach to the SDG, that landscape level focus, and make the most of it? How can the desire for NRG, for SD, to integrate the SDGs and the other Rio conventions make more of the policy and practice cohere at this scale? This is the jurisdictional bridge across urban and rural areas that's very strong for regional governments. And I'm wondering, how can we, in the time that remains, map out and better understand that strategic advantage, not only in the review process that comes, but much more importantly in the implementation that follows. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a very oh, wait, there's some more. I'm going to mute you again. Okay, there we go. That's a very interesting question. I will definitely try to reply a little bit from energy first perspective, and perhaps I think this could be a good question also to have the support from UNDP Art in this regard, and in case any of the other governments would like to comment, that is also welcome. So, well, first, indeed, regional governments are the ones that are responsible for addressing this bridge, these linkages between the urban and rural areas that you mentioned. And I think that, as we can see through the comments from regional governments on the ground that we heard today, they are already taking the first step to make this integrated territorial approach happen. And especially with these different institutions they are creating to bring together their responsible area for the environment, for agriculture, for economy, for gender equality. So by bringing together these different departments that somehow usually were working separately, we are already contributing to improve coherence at the level of regional governments and make sure that we have this integrated territorial approach, especially in regards to the SDGs that are being reviewed this year and on energy forestry perspective. As I mentioned briefly during my presentation, energy forestry has two flagship initiatives. One that works on biodiversity, the Regions for Biodiversity Learning Platform, and another one that works on climate adaptation, the Regions Adapt. And already in those two initiatives that we have, we are going to organize specific exchanges to make sure that we integrate the respective SDGs to the discussions that are going there. Last week, or a couple of weeks now, Energy Forestry launched the report of the Regions Adapt, assessing the main risks that regional governments are facing on climate adaptation. And well, the main topic that appeared there was definitely water management, well, in regards to both droughts and floods. And it was very nice to see that SDG 6, the SDG on water, is also appearing. Yeah, my colleagues are sending the link to that report that I'm just mentioning on the chat box. You can see that SDG 6 on water is already appearing on the discussions of the Regions Adapt to make sure that these adaptation plans that regional governments are building or reviewing are going to include some elements to contribute to well, achieving these specific SDGs. So already building some clear linkages with SDG 13 on climate change and many of the others. So I think this integration is something that can naturally happen in a regional government, but especially being boosted by the 2030 agenda. So that's why we are especially excited to work around it. But I don't know if colleagues Gemma from UNDP Art or colleagues from the regional government would like to comment on Arthur's question. Yes, I guess Gemma wants to react. Please.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, Rodrigo. Yeah, thanks. Indeed, a very interesting question. I think Arthur was pointing at quite a few interesting issues. He was mentioning the territorial approach. He was mentioning the links between the rural and the urban. And I think here, especially the intermediate governments have a particular important role, because they are the ones who can really work in this integrated approach between the rural and the urban, and this is going to be crucial for the SDGs. We have in the past in our program supported a number of countries, around approximately 20 countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, to establish territorial working groups, which is either a new body or either adapting a body that was already created, where you can find representatives of different levels of governments, within governments, different departments, and also representatives of civil society, of private sector. So at the end, you have in a particular territory a working group that makes decisions in a participatory way, and it actually helps to break the silos that Estíbaliz was mentioning before. It's really important that both internally in the government, in the structure of a government, and externally, there are these institutions, these bodies, this entity that can actually facilitate the articulation from a particular government within the different departments, and we also saw a very good example in what they are doing in Catalonia in these regards, but also in the connection between the government of a particular territory and then, as I was saying, the civil society, the private sector, and also other levels of government. So in the past, for us, it has worked, as I was saying, the establishment of these territorial working groups that can actually create this space for articulation between different actors, and that many of them are now being adapted to implement the SDGs, because, as we were saying before, at the end of the day, the SDGs is nothing new. It's nothing that the governments were not already working on. So I think it's important to, of course, then in each territory, it works different, different formula or different model, but in general, trying to find this multi-actor and multi-level articulation spaces is something that generally has a positive impact in the territory.
Oh yeah, I think we couldn't give a more complete response. Thank you very much. I understand that is one of the focuses that UNDP Art has been working on. So Gemma was definitely the most appropriate person to reply to that. We are reaching the end of our webinar. Unfortunately, I'm very, very happy to have had this fruitful discussion. I do acknowledge a question from the colleagues from Goias. They are asking in which department or office or ministry is being led the coordination of the SDGs efforts. I understand that varies a little bit among the different governments. I know that, for example, Sao Paulo, as we heard, they are coordinating it through the governor's office, but also in close interaction with the Secretariat for the Environment. Catalonia is taking the lead with the advisory council, but also in close coordination with some other ministries, in Basque Country also from the president's office. But of course, this depends a little bit on the structure and how things are going in your own government. I think the message that we have, it's gonna be important to make this coordination among the different departments. I also have acknowledged here a question that I didn't see. He was connected. Mr. Fabian from the government of Morona Santiago, Ecuador. Welcome. I'm glad to see that you joined. He has some questions to the Basque Country, but unfortunately, considering the time, I will put you in contact bilaterally so we can facilitate that dialogue. I can see that Raquel from Catalonia is willing to clarify on something, if that could be very quick, so we can just close the webinar. And for the other questions that we didn't have time, we are gonna approach the speakers from today and share with them some of the questions. And we can, well, in the follow-up, as we are going to write some contents in our website and articles in our next newsletter, we can make sure to try to respond to some of the questions that were not responded. Thank you. Raquel, if you could be very quick.
I will be very brief. Just to clarify that in the case of Catalonia, the Interdepartmental Commission is integrated in the Department of Foreign Affairs. and with the cooperation and work with all the departments of the Catalan government. And our advisory council gives support, technical support to this commission. But it's the Department of Foreign Affairs who is taking the lead on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Well, in general, thank you very much all the attendees, and especially thank you for the speakers, for the regional governments that shared their cases. Yes, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe to our newsletter, especially if you are interested in follow-up, receiving the recording of this webinar, and following on Energy First the activities. I was very pleased to have this very interesting discussion here today, and we plan on organizing different opportunities for exchange in the near future. So stay tuned in our website, Twitter. We are using the hashtag regions for SDGs. And thank you very much, and let's continue active and contributing to the implementation of this important agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.